Hi folks, today's video is going to be about a prettier and a more functional bash. If you're like me and you're not really a power user, especially at the command prompt, but you do have to sometimes administer maybe say a remote virtual private server or any other server, maybe even a Raspberry Pi sitting elsewhere in your network or say an Open Media Vault server, then you'll probably notice though that it's quicker to just SSH into a server like that or a machine, and especially when you have to do things like unzipping of a file or deleting of a whole lot of files or a directory even. It's a lot quicker to do that from the command line than it is with a graphical user application. So you'll notice sometimes if you're doing remote work and you've got to delete a lot of files, it can maybe run for like 20 minutes or so if you've got to unzip big files or delete a whole lot of files using a GUI app across your remote connection. Doing it from the command line can just about be instantaneous. So it is possible with a couple of tweaks that you could make for any sort of non-power user to maybe do this a lot quicker and easier with the bash. And then for that perspective, it makes it a lot friendlier and nicer to use as well, I think. So I'm listed here a couple of applications. Essentially, it is sort of using Starship cross-platform shell. And I've said there with the nerd fonts because they will actually add certain symbols and provide a sort of a clearer interface to work with. Then something like Autojump, folder navigation, Exa for listings, and also some alias commands for your bashrc file. So I think let me just show you what I mean by actually opening a terminal up and we can have a look at it. Here's a terminal prompt. You're obviously going to notice that the Starship customized sort of prompt over there. I'll get to that just now. But what I also want to show here was if you've set up your SSH correctly to log into remote servers, that does not have to be a slow process. You can. I've set up already some, and I'll put a link below this video as well to everything I'm talking about, as well as how to set up this SSH. I'm not going to cover SSH today really, but I just want to show you it's not a very lengthy process. My Open Media Vault server, I've just given it a shortcut OMV. For my virtual private server, I'm using VPS. You could name these whatever you want to, but once it's set up, it's as quick as this. You just type in SSH, whatever the alias name you've given it is, you hit enter and you end. It's as quick as that. That is how quick I'm actually into my virtual private server, or my OMV server in this case. And you'll see the prompt has also changed because I'm now the root user in the root user directory with the time prompt. So that you'll see it does change, obviously, depending on where you are. And then to sort of jump into a directory, any directory that you've previously navigated to, it will remember in sort of waiting orders. So the quick way now for me to jump to a directory I've been to before is I could just type in, say, J space, let me just put that out the way, J space and data. And it instantly jumps to that path that I have been to before. So instead of typing the whole thing out or even remembering it, it's going to remember all these commonly used directories. If you've got some that have got the same name twice, like data, you can actually adjust weightings specifically if you go and do some settings and changes in the Autojump. And then to get things like directory listings, I'm using Exa as an alternative to alias, but I often can't remember. I must use the Exa command. So I've actually got some aliases and I'm using things like ls all, which says to me ls for directory listing, that's how I remember it, and all. But this is actually an Exa command it's executing, and you'll see that's actually what it looks like, showing you what that the files in that directory actually look like. It's highlighting the color of the permissions for the files or folders, which is very useful. User, often part of your problem on a server is you've given incorrect user permissions, and that's why things don't update or work or change. So this is one handy way of always seeing what the user permissions look like, when last modified, and then what are the actual folder or file names over there. And just by way of comparison, if we do an ls command, you'll see that's what you sort of get, even with color activated. It's a lot more blander, should I say, than the Exa one. And then I've also set up some other aliases. For example, so these are aliases now set in the bashrc. Normally you're going to type clear to clear this screen, but I've got a shortcut, for example, that still uses CLS, and it's as quick as that then. And by way of example, I've also got one or two other applications I've installed, such as NeoFetch and NCDU for directory space. So instead of typing or having to remember neofetch to show the system stats, I've just got an alias. I just type in stats like that, and it brings it up immediately for you. On the space side, I run ncdu normally to see what are the files or folders taking up the most space on my server or my machine. So again, I'm just using a shortcut or an alias called space. It's not actually on my server. I haven't installed ncdu there, but I can show you on my own machine what that looks like. And then things to go like back to a home directory. You can see we're obviously sitting in a subdirectory at the moment. There's no cd tilde sign sort of thing. You can just type something like, say, home, and it takes you back immediately to your home directory. Or if you went there again, let's just say j data to go back there. I could also just go up a directory by typing 2 dots, and it goes one up, two dots, and it goes another one up. So these are all aliases that you can set up in your bashrc file to make things a lot easier and simpler when navigating or issuing commands, if you don't want to have to remember long commands and so on. So let me just go back to my machine, and I can just show you there briefly what I meant. If I type space, it starts up the ncdu immediately, and it starts scanning my drive for what's taking up the most space on the drive. And I love this command. Actually, I use it quite a bit for checking files and folders, both on my server, on my VPS server at least, and on my home machine. And what you do here is you just navigate in to go and see what is sort of taking up the most space on your drive. The other one that I use quite a bit, and I can never quite remember all the commands, if I'm searching history, well, you could type history and then have to scroll up and down everything trying to find it, or you can try and remember, how do I put a search term in for a particular name or variable or command that I'm searching for instead of searching the whole of my history? Well, I can't remember that command. It's just the way, I can't. So I could, for example, use an alias which I've set up as H and nano. That will quickly search history for every time I've used nano and return it for me. So hit enter. There's all the times that I've run nano. So if I now want to execute one of those, I could say, checking my FS tab, you can see it's actually history command line number 20. Then all you're going to do is put in exclamation mark 20, enter. Oh, it's going to ask for a password. And there you're in your FS tab, or whatever the command was that you wanted to run. So this is a lot easier and simpler for me remembering things that I'm going to use fairly often. I think let me just go through the steps in and show you how I did this. I should just say at this point as well is the inspiration for this video really came from watching Chris Titus's video, and I'll put a link here at the top as well, just if you want to jump to it and have a look. He'd set all this up and he'd automated it with a script file. That wasn't working for me on Arch Linux, but I see now he has added, it looks like a setup file there called setup-arch.sh. So it looks like he might have set up a script to automate this now. But for some people, either you haven't come right with that, it's not working, or you just want to understand maybe how to do it yourself, because maybe you don't want to implement everything. You can implement just one or two of these ideas if you want to. Then you can follow through the rest of my video, and I'll try and explain and just show how I've briefly set each of these things up. What I should just say though is that for Starship to work, the customized prompt, Nerd Fonts is the recommended one to use, mainly because Nerd Fonts not only looks a bit prettier, but it also contains a whole bunch of special symbols that'll work. So you'll see now I'm on my command prompt, for example, here. If I was to go to if I jump to one of my GitHub directories where I've got my code, you'll see it's in, but you do see here, not only is the path changed, but it's also indicating the GitHub branch that's actually in use. I'm using main at the moment, but if you were on sub branches or anything, it'll actually also show that to you. And it's got a couple of other customizations like that on Starship. But to make use of that, as well as these sort of fonts here, then you do need to have Nerd Fonts installed. If you don't, it's fine, it'll still work, but you're going to miss out on a couple of those little extra features. So what I just want to say about Nerd Fonts is it's big, 1.7 gigabytes if you install all of it. I'm only running the Meslo LGS Nerd Font Mono 14, so I've only installed that. If you are on Arch Linux or using the AUR, it is possible just to install that one set of fonts on its own. But otherwise, you can go to their GitHub page, and they've got about 7 or 8 different ways of installing the fonts or parts of the fonts. So, that's maybe another way to go. I wouldn't recommend, like I said, installing everything though. But once you've got the fonts installed, what you're going to do is in your terminal, you're just going to right click for most of these terminals anyway, and you'll say here, edit current profile. And under appearances, you'll see there is your font for your terminal. So remember, this font, you're not going to be installing these fonts on your remote servers and your Raspberry Pi, because you're going to be accessing it through your terminal, and your terminal will be making use of this font or interpreting any fonts that are coming back. So it's the only place you really need to do this on your local machine. And if you click choose for fonts, if you see things like here, nerd font, then you know they are installed. If you're not finding it anywhere up here, then it means you don't have the fonts yet installed. So as I said, in my case, I just chose that font, regular, and 14 was a comfortable size for me to use. And that was really it for the fonts then. Now what I want to do is, because this is already set up on my computer, I'm going to just use a clean VM that I've installed, where I've got Ubuntu Budgie installed, and we can just go through that to do the actual installations of these various applications. So let me just close this. This is my virtual machine with Budgie on it. You can see from the menu system at the bottom, and if we look at its terminal, you're going to see that it is fairly basic. And if I go to alias, you'll see it's just got the basic alias on it. If I do jump, nothing's going to happen. It'll say there, J command not found. So the steps I'm going to show now will just help configure these things and also activate them. Most of them, they will be activated by some changes in your bashrc file. So I'd also recommend, you just back up that bashrc file. But let's do the installations first, and then I'll show you my sample file, which you can download from Pastebin, and then you can extract pieces of that out of there, so you don't overwrite anything you've already got. Or just edit yours to match what you'd like to make use of. That's often the easiest, because once you get started with the aliases, it's quite exciting, and you can get very carried away with all sorts of things you'd like to pump in there. So now that we've already got the nerd fonts, remember that's installed on my own local machine. The next thing we want to really do is install the Starship cross-shell prompt customization. I'll put the link also to their website below, but in essence, to install it, all we're going to do is run this command. Let me just increase this a little bit. A bit bigger. There we go. So this command you run not only to install it, but also to update it. And partly the reason for that is that it doesn't apply the config file. So once you've installed it, which it's now already happened here, you'll see the prompt is not changed. You've got to install the starship.toml file. That is the config file that determines what this does. So if you find you've installed and nothing's happened, that could be one of the reasons, and the other could be that you haven't activated in the bashrc. So what I've recommended here is, and let's just go back here, we can use Chris Titus's his repo, and you'll see he has got something here called starship.toml. And all I'm going to do is grab that file, and we're going to put it into the home directory /.config location. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste the contents of his file. That's actually what the content of the file looks like. Take raw. I imagine there is an easier way. I'm just going to see, no, we are in the .config, starship.toml, that's right, and paste that inside here, and then Control X, yes to save, that is the name, yes, and close. Okay, so we've got the config file now. If we do ls, you can see there should be the config file somewhere. There it is. So if that's working, that should be fine. Once it's activated in the bashrc file, then our prompt should change. So that was the one part. Then let me just clear this quickly to use clear still. The next thing to install is the Autojump folder navigation. And to install that, we're just going to type in the install command. If you are using Manjaro or one of the others, this stuff I actually installed just through using Pamac or Pacman installer. I'm just doing it from the command prompt now, really, because I am using an Ubuntu distro. Okay, so there we go. That should be installed now. And you can use Autojump-S to see if there's any stats or anything set, but there shouldn't be yet because we don't really have anything. And the other problem is we haven't activated it either yet in our bashrc, so we're not going to see anything yet. So the last thing we just want to set up quickly is that Exa command. As you'll see, we don't have it installed yet. And that is a simple installation command as well. You just install the package. So all of these packages all install, but like I said, you've got to activate them through the bashrc file. And one or two of these had me puzzled because I didn't get them to work at first. Okay, so X is installed. And I just want to see, does that show anything? Not yet. Okay, so same thing. So the last thing we really have to do is look at the bashrc. So this is my paste bin. And if you go to it from that link below the video, you will see there is one. That bashrc over here is actually on my own desktop computer. But this one over here, the basic bashrc for my servers, is just a little bit more simplified. I've taken out some of the older default stuff that I had in there. I think this should already be raw, but let's just copy raw. And then go back to the bashrc over here. So this will be in your home directory. I think it's a hidden file, isn't it? Yes. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this out, but what I would suggest otherwise is that you, well, back up your file. I'm not going to do it now because this is just a standard VM install I've done at the moment, but you can actually just copy across what's sort of not in. In other words, you're not overwriting. Yes, there we go. There's all my stuff. So if we just have a look through this bashrc, these are the aliases that you set over here. So what is nice is I mentioned ping a bit earlier. So typically if you want to ping and you just want to have a count of 10, you've got to add the -C10 every time you type it in. But if you've sort of pre-prepared your format like this, I could just type in now ping with the name of a website, and it'll automatically pen the website's name at the end of this with, and essentially it's using that -C10 as a default. You'll see here as well, same sort of thing. Normally the clear command is what you're going to use, but an alias now will be set for CLS. So if I just type in CLS, it will execute clear. If I've got, and you do need NeoFetch installed, but if I type now in just stats, it will run NeoFetch for me in the background. And here was the alias, for example, for home. If I've set that alias, it will execute the right command to go to home. there was the 2 dots as well. If I just type in 2 dots, it executes the proper CD command to go 1 up. And there was the others that I'd set already. These are sort of the preferred options I like to have using Exa. So for ls all, which is the current directories, files, and folders, then it's executing this. You can obviously customize these yourself as well, if you want to tweak them any other way. ls dir, I think, was a tree view, which is quite nice. And I've also limited it to 3 levels, but again, you can adjust that there. I've also got an alias set here for ls itself. So when I type ls, it automatically adds these options as sort of as a default again. And there was the one I did for space. There's the alias for history that I used. And there's a couple of others here that Chris had as well, but I haven't really made much use of, but I have tweaked and fixed them so that they have worked properly. And you'll see the important ones are here at the bottom. These are the 2 commands you need. This one is to activate the Autojump over there with J, and it is really just running this script file that does get installed with Autojump. It does cater for about 3 or 4 types of shell environments. So this one is just making sure that it works for Bash, and this is the one that you will have to put in to make Starship work. So once you've put that in place for your Bashrc, then it should actually start doing all of this for you. So let's just save this and go out and clear. Oh, well, I don't know if we can type yet. Let me just have a look. So if your commands don't work yet, you've either just got to close your terminal and just open it again, or you should be able to type this in as well to load it. There you go. Oh, okay. So now what's happened here is you'll see these symbols are not actually working properly. So what's happened is, because I'm inside the VM and I'm not accessing this, I haven't logged into it from my own machine where my terminal has got nerd fonts already installed, you'll see it's not loading the symbols and so on properly. That's really the only reason why that's not working properly there. So if you're going to do it on your own desktop like this, you would have had your nerd fonts installed already, and it should work fine for you. But I can now start looking at things like, say, CLS should work. I should be able to do the ls all. There we go. And I can also try the ls dir, which is the tree view. And it gives you that sort of a view. Now, just bear in mind, though, I just did put a couple of things inside the video folder. But if I was now to type J for jump and videos, you'll see it won't go anywhere yet because I haven't. You do need to first of all navigate to all these various directories so that J, the jump command, will work in the future. So I could just say, where am I? CD config. So I'm going to go, I'm going to go to there, videos, ls all. I made it. Oh, I've got a couple of subdirectories. So let's go into 2020, 2022. And if we go there, you can see I've got a couple of directories, subdirectories in there as well. So now I could go to, say, birthday. And I'm there. So you can see there is a path over there now. If I want to go back to home, remember now we've got all the aliases loaded as well. So I can just type home and I'm back there at roots home. Because I've already navigated to this folder previously, birthday or 2022, all I now should be able to do is say J for jump and say 2022. And if you hit enter, it takes you straight into that folder. Or you could have gone, well, it would be a bit pointless. Let me just say 2 dots, and I could say jump birthday, and there you are in birthday. So as I said, I think with these couple of things you can install really can make navigating around on Bash way easier, especially things you do, really fairly often, or commands that you've got to repeat fairly often, but you can't always quite remember what the syntaxes are or the options or whatever the case is. Tweak your Bashrc with some aliases. Maybe consider these couple of applications, And you might actually find that working with Bash becomes a lot more user-friendly. And as I said, certainly if you've got to work remotely and you have to copy or delete or unzip files or whatever the case is, it can go much, much faster actually if you are making use of Bash. And if Bash has now become more friendly and nicer to look at, well, maybe it's going to be easier for you to use it as well. So yeah, I hope you found it interesting, and thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.